Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session on enhancing API security with SOAP API login retirement. Firstly, just starting off with a forward-looking statement, I will be talking about some items on the roadmap, so please do make your purchasing decisions based upon current shipping product. First, I would like to thank you for attending this session. It's important for us to be able to communicate this type of retirement. We do know it is impactful given the extensive use of SOAP API login. So I thank you for your attendance and if you have any questions at the end. Firstly, who am I? I'm Jeremy Westerman. I'm Director of Product Management for Salesforce APIs, in particular the data APIs, SObject, SOCL query, the query API, and the bulk APIs. And as part of that, I am responsible for the SOAP API, including SOAP API login, and so driving this retirement. So what is the status of SOAP API login? Let's just start by understanding where we are at the moment. You know, today, SOAP API login is supported in API versions 31 through 64. So it's currently supported and is available for use. All API versions less than 30 have already been retired and therefore they're not available. However, SOAP API login is not available in API versions 65 onwards. So we've stopped making it available in new releases of the platform. And those existing versions where it's supported, 31 through 64, it's going to be both deprecated and retired with the summer 25 release, which is basically next year. So with that, understanding that status, first it's worthwhile understanding why are we retiring SOAP API login. You're probably very familiar with with the recent security vulnerabilities, the security attacks, and therefore there's a lot of work going on with Salesforce to uplift our security posture. And as part of that activity, we are adopting a secure by default posture for authenticating external applications that requires the use of external client applications and OAuth. So that is what we are transitioning to in the future, that all API authentication by external apps must use external client applications and OAuth too. And so to support this initiative, we are retiring SOAP API login. And there are really two primary issues with SOAP API login. Firstly, the credentials are actually passed in the message body. Username and password for the authentication are passed in that message body, potentially exposing them to attackers. And then secondly, there is no explicit identity within the org, within your org, so you can track APIs are from this specific application or that specific application, understand their API use, and maybe secure and monitor that API use, and even block that API use. Just as an antidote to that, I'm also responsible for the API version retirement and working with customers trying to identify applications that are using specific versions of the APIs is very difficult because there isn't an explicit application identity if they're using SOAP API login. So this is going to also address that sort of management and visibility issue. And with ECAs and OAuth 2, we address both of those issues. Now, the first thing that you need to be aware of, and this is some of you have already encountered this, is that when you create a new org today, SOAP API login is disabled. Even for those supported versions, 31 through 64, it is disabled by default in a new org. And your org admin must enable it. You do that in setup. If you go into the setup and you go into user interface in setup, there is the option there, enable SOAP API login. That's only available for new orgs. The org admin can enable that, and it's a one-time activity. For existing orgs, it's already enabled. And so thus, if you have a new org, you don't do that enablement, this is going to be the error message your client applications are going to receive. Invalid operation, SOAP API login is disabled by default. So if you start up a new org and you get users that are using apps or encountering this issue, this is going to be the reason. Now, with this release in summer 26, we are introducing a new control, which you need to be aware of. And it's a new control, so admins can therefore have further secure the use of a SOAP API login. As I've already mentioned, in a newly created org, the admin first has to enable SOAP API login in that org. But once they have done that, for specific users to authenticate using SOAP API login, then they have to be given a new user perm. So if those users are using an application that is authenticating using SOAP API login, those users have to be given this new user perm, use any API auth. If they don't have that user perm, then their request to authenticate using SOAP API login will fail. They will be rejected. And so therefore, if you, with the summer 26, if you're starting new orgs and you have applications that use SOAP API login, then you need to know all the users that are using that app and give them this user perm. For existing orgs, this is not going to be enforced by default. However, the admin can choose to optionally enable and disable this enforcement if they wish. So if you wish to adopt this level of securing access to SOAP API login, you can optionally enable that in existing orgs. Now, we may make that mandatory enforcement in either winter 27 or spring 27 prior to the retirement. So we may enforce this. So this is a heads up. So our guidance, our recommendation is that you start to do an inventory of which users are actually using apps which authenticate using SOAP API login and start to assign that user perm in advance to those users. And that's going to provide you with that visibility into which users are using this authentication mechanism. Now, if you don't do that, if you don't assign this user perm, this is going to be the error that you are going to return back. That's going to be, however, how the application renders that is up to that application, but it's going to be an insufficient access error message. You know, SOAP API login requires the use of the use any API user permission. And so they are going to require, you'll see that error message. Likewise, it's very simple to assign it. It's just another user perm, whether you manage your user permissions via profiles or permission sets. You will see that use any API auth permission there, and you can assign that in the profile or permission set. My personal recommendation would be to create a new permission set solely for this, providing SOAP API access. And then you can assign that permission set to the individual users which require it. And so that's going to make it easier so that you have visibility into which users can actually authenticate using SOAP API login. And so as we approach the SOAP API login retirement, which is now just over a year away, there are really, you need to think about taking these actions. Firstly, identify the applications that are using SOAP API login. Collect that inventory of applications. And then if that application is developed within your organization, the development teams responsible for those applications need to start to upgrade that to use OAuth 2 and to use an external client application for that application. If that is from a third-party vendor, then contact that vendor to understand what their upgrade plans are. Now, how can you identify those applications using SOAP API login? There's actually two mechanisms. The first mechanism is via the login history. You can use this in setup, If you go into the setup, login history, in that will show you all the various logins which are being made into your org. And what you are looking for are the entries with the login type of other Apex API or partner product, and a login subtype of SOAP API. That will indicate that those are logging in with SOAP API login, and it will also list the users. And because there isn't an explicit application identity, it won't identify the application, but then you can contact those users to understand what application they are using. And if you have event monitoring licensed, then you can actually view, this is the login event log type. You can actually view this within the event monitoring as well. Secondly, you can use the API total usage event. Now, every org has access to the previous 24 hours of this API total usage event. And within setup, you can go into event monitoring. There's a tool there called the event log file browser, and you can download these API total usage events. It will generate you a CSV file containing all of those events. Alternatively, we do provide a script, a Python script that is available so that you can automate the download of these event log types. So that script is specifically set up that you could run daily, and it will download all of these API usage events. And then you can monitor you can look inside those event log entries, and you're looking for an API family of SOAP and a resource, API resource of login. That will indicate a SOAP login call, and then you can actually contact, it will also have the username, you can contact the user of that application. Besides the SOAP API login retirement, monitoring the API usage event is actually just good insight into the API calls coming into your org. And so I would recommend just investigating the use of that script, because it just provides you that visibility into all of your API calls. A lot of information there. And then migrating to the external client applications and OAuth 2.0. OAuth 2.0 provides a number of authentication flows which are available, and which one that you will choose to use really depends upon your specific use case. So once you've created your external client application, you can specify the OAuth flows that it will support. Now, if you have an interactive experience, if your application is has a user interaction, so that is the user logging on, then these are the two flows that are going to be appropriate. The web server flow with proof key or for code exchange, commonly pronounced PXE, or the user agent flow. Those flows are going to do a redirect such that the user is going to provide a username and password to authenticate to the org, get the access token which your application can use. Alternatively, if your application is more of a server-to-server integration, it's more of an automated application where there is no user interaction, then the JOT bearer flow or the client credentials flow are going to be used. I would recommend the JOT bearer token because it is more secure. It does require a digital certificate, so it's going to be a more secure form of authentication than client credentials. But both of those are available. So it's going to be very, very specific for your specific use case. Now, also I want to mention there the release update. You're probably familiar with the release cards in setup, giving notifications of the various release updates that are available with each release. There is a release card for SOAP API login retirement. It provides some information. It does provide a link to the knowledge article I am going to talk about. So you can get a link to the knowledge article there. But it also provides you the ability to do a test run to see is your org, how your org is going to operate when SOAP API login is retired. So if you enable that test run, it will disable SOAP API login in your org. All the previous mechanisms I talked about with the use of the use any API auth user perm, they are disabled as well. And so by testing this, it gives you an idea of how your org will behave when SOAP API login is retired in the summer 27. And then you can disable the test run to re-enable the login operation. Now, for those of you that are using SOAP API login in your orgs, as of next month, you will get a friendly email every month reminding you of that usage. And so we're doing a query. We will see the SOAP API. In this case, we will look for April. Was the SOAP API login use in your org in April? If there is, we will send you a friendly email. Just as a heads up, as a constant reminder. And so you can start to expect those as of next month. And you now know the guy that's sending them to you. Okay. Now, just briefly, also for a colleague, giving you also notification of also another authentication retirement for the Salesforce Connect cross-org adapter. If you are using the cross-org adapter, there are changes coming in how you authenticate. In particular, for example, password authentication, that uses SOAP API login underneath the covers. So if you're using the cross-org adapter, you need to move to named credentials. Cross-org adapter now supports the use of named credentials for authentication. And so in your provider org, you can create an ECA that will create you the consumer key and secret. In the subscriber org, you then create your named credential using that provided key, those generated keys, and then you can use that named credential within your cross-org adapter connections. So also just be aware that this authentication is also changing. Now, for more information, this QR code will send you to the SOAP API login retirement knowledge article. That should be your go-to reference. We keep that up to date continuously. When there's new information that you need to be aware of, we will put it within that knowledge article. And so that should be your go-to reference. When you stop receiving the friendly email reminders on a monthly basis, then you can discard this knowledge article. Up until then, I would definitely have this bookmarked. And so finally, I'd just like to finish by saying thank you. If you've got any questions, I will be staying around so that I can answer those. Okay, thank you.